She thought she was interviewing a relic from another era. But when Renee Blake challenged Bill Clinton's beliefs on live television, what followed wasn't a debate. It was a confrontation, one that left her studio and the nation stunned. The countdown clock hit 0. Red lights blinked to life across the stage of the Renee Blake show as cameras locked focus and microphones crackled. The audience hushed. A slow piano intro played for 4 seconds before fading. Renee Blake smiled into the lens, composed, eloquent, lethal beneath the surface. Her navy blue suit was perfectly pressed, her tone disarming. She turned slightly to her left. "Sitting with me tonight," she began, "is a man whose voice once shaped a generation. Former President of the United States, Mr. Bill Clinton." Polite applause. Clinton nodded with his signature warmth. "Nice to be here, Renee." He looked older than most remembered, silver hair, deeper lines around his eyes, but he held a calm that filled the room. As always, Clinton looked like he had already considered the next 5 questions. Renee's smile remained fixed. She went through the opening motions, questions about leadership in a digital age, the future of public trust, and how truth itself had become a political tool. Clinton answered carefully. Nothing too sharp. A few jokes. A mention of Arkansas. Familiar territory. But 5 minutes in, Renee leaned forward. Her tone changed. "Mr. President," she said, "you've been increasingly vocal about your personal faith in recent years. I've read your interviews, watched your public speeches. You've quoted scripture. You've talked about salvation." She tilted her head. "In a nation that's growing more secular and more diverse, do you truly believe that Christianity still offers the only path to truth?" Clinton didn't blink, but he adjusted slightly in his seat. "I believe it offers a truth," he replied calmly. "One I found for myself. I've never told anyone else how to believe, but I won't apologize for believing it." Renee pressed in. "But isn't that the problem, Mr. President? That very idea, that you found truth, and others haven't, is what people call exclusionary. You talk about freedom, unity, compassion, but how can that coexist with the claim that there's only one way to God?" The audience stirred. A few quiet coughs. One man leaned forward. Clinton looked at her for a long second. Then he spoke, not louder but lower. "Let me ask you something," he said. "If you were in a burning building and someone said, 'There's a fire escape, follow me,' would you call them narrow-minded, or would you be grateful?" A few people in the crowd shifted. Renee's expression didn't change. "We're not in a burning building, Mr. President." Clinton's smile faded. "Some of us are," he said softly. The silence that followed felt heavier than anything said before it. Renee paused. That wasn't a quote she could pivot around easily. She looked at her producer in the glass booth, who gave a subtle nod. "Keep going." She straightened up. "You once led the most powerful nation in the world. Now you speak as a kind of preacher. Has politics failed you, Mr. President? Or have you chosen faith because it gives simpler answers than reality does?" There it was. The provocation. But Clinton's face didn't harden. In fact, he leaned back slightly and crossed one ankle over his knee. "I chose faith," he said, "because politics taught me its limits. You can change policy. You can pass laws. But you can't legislate peace into a man's heart. Only grace can do that." Now the audience was fully engaged. Some nodded. Others narrowed their eyes. But no one looked away. Renee tried again. "But don't you think your message alienates people? Muslims, Jews, atheists, people who don't share your beliefs." "I don't think truth alienates people," Clinton said. "I think it invites them to wrestle with it." A beat. Renee's voice sharpened. "So you don't regret the public statements you've made? You don't believe they might be outdated?" Clinton looked straight into the camera. His voice was steady. "I think truth doesn't check Twitter trends before speaking. And I think the most dangerous thing we can do is stop saying what we really believe." The screen cut to wide shot. Renee blinked once, then looked down at her notes. She was losing control of the narrative. And for the first time in her career, she knew it. The commercial break couldn't come fast enough. Behind the scenes, stagehands moved in near silence, repowdering Renee Blake's forehead, straightening her collar. The producer leaned into her earpiece, voice low and urgent. Stick to the plan. Regain control. Renee nodded faintly but said nothing. Her eyes stayed fixed on the man across from her. Bill Clinton sat still, unfazed, untouched, as if the stage belonged to him now. He wasn't combative. He hadn't raised his voice. But something in the way he spoke, measured, unshaken, had shifted the dynamic entirely. 3 minutes later, the red light blinked again. They were back on air. "Welcome back to the Renee Blake Show," she said, this time with less warmth. "We're speaking with former President Bill Clinton about faith, leadership, and moral responsibility in today's divided America." Clinton nodded. Renee smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Mr. President," she began again, "you've said some powerful things tonight. But let's move beyond philosophy for a moment. Let's talk about impact." Clinton leaned in slightly. "You served during one of the most transformative eras in American politics. And now, post office, you're using your platform to promote a belief system that many say is outdated. My question is, do you recognize the power you still have, and how dangerous it might be to speak with such moral certainty?" The studio held its breath. Clinton took a beat. "It's not certainty that's dangerous," he said. "It's silence." He let it linger. "The world is full of loud people saying nothing. If I have a platform and I don't use it to speak what I know to be true, then what's the point of ever having it?" Renee tried again, her tone now openly critical. "But your truth," she said, "isn't shared by everyone, and yet you present it like it should be." "I don't demand anyone share it," Clinton replied calmly, "but I won't pretend it's optional just to make people comfortable." Now, there were murmurs in the audience. Not disapproval, but discomfort, the kind that comes when conviction enters a space designed for entertainment. Renee tapped her cards. "You do realize how that sounds, right? That kind of language has been used to justify exclusion, even oppression." Clinton's voice lowered. "And vague language has been used to justify apathy." The words landed like a stone in still water. "I've been in rooms where people talk about change, but don't change. Where we talk about love, but won't name what we believe. It's not progress if it costs truth." Renee blinked. She wasn't used to guests who pushed back without aggression. She tried a different angle. "Let me ask you directly, Mr. President," she said. "Do you believe people who don't accept Jesus are lost?" Clinton didn't dodge. "I believe we're all lost without grace. And I believe Jesus is the one who found me." Silence again. The camera zoomed in slightly on Renee's face. Her fingers curled under her cue cards. This was not the conversation she had planned. But then she made a choice. "You know," she said slowly, "I grew up in a church. Choir on Sundays. My mother prayed out loud in the kitchen. But the world changed. I changed. I saw too much hypocrisy. Too many people claiming they had the only way to God, while ignoring the poor, judging the hurting, silencing the doubters. So I stopped believing in absolute truth." Clinton didn't interrupt. He waited. Renee continued, her voice soft but firm. "So when you sit here and say your faith is truth, it feels like a step backward, a return to the very thing that made people like me walk away." Now it was Clinton's turn to pause. He wasn't smiling. "Then maybe," he said gently, "you didn't walk away from the truth. Maybe you walked away from people who misused it." The audience froze. No applause. No laughter. Just stillness. And for a moment, even Renee Blake had nothing to say. The air in the studio had shifted. No lights changed, no camera angles tilted. But something was different now. The audience felt it. So did the producers behind the glass. And Renee Blake, seasoned, sharp, always in command, was the first to admit it silently to herself. She wasn't winning. Her next words had to count. "Mr. President," she said, her voice cool but tighter than before, "it's easy to sit in that chair and talk about grace. But how many people have been hurt by the very system you defend?" Clinton nodded slowly. "Plenty," he said, "and I've been one of them. I've made mistakes. I've failed people. That's why grace matters." "But don't you see?" Renee pressed. "That's the paradox. You promote something that has wounded people and expect them to trust it again." Clinton's reply was simple. I'm not asking them to trust the system, he said. I'm asking them to look past it. The studio grew still. Clinton leaned forward now, not to dominate, but to level. There's a difference, he said, between religion and redemption. I didn't come back to church because the church was perfect. I came back because Jesus didn't leave me when I wasn't. That sentence landed differently. Some audience members looked down at their hands. Others crossed their arms, either for defense or protection. Renee didn't respond right away. Her cards now sat unused on the table. For the first time in her career, she felt them, her curated defenses, start to peel away. You really believe that? She said quietly. I do, Clinton answered. Not because someone taught me to. Because when everything else I trusted collapsed, that was the only thing still standing. Renee looked down. Her throat tightened. I used to pray, she admitted, her voice breaking just slightly. Years ago. Before ratings. Before contracts. Before all this. She motioned vaguely toward the cameras. Clinton said nothing. He didn't need to. I stopped, she said, because it felt like talking to silence. Clinton's voice was softer now. Sometimes silence isn't absence. It's an invitation. She looked up, locking eyes with him. To what? To be real, he said. To stop performing. To ask the questions you're afraid of. And to be still long enough for an answer. Another pause. It wasn't awkward. It was sacred. The audience wasn't watching a talk show anymore. They were watching two people, public figures, yes, but right now just human beings, wrestling in front of a nation. The silence was broken by a cough from the third row. Renee blinked, as if coming out of a trance. Her voice, when it returned, carried something new. Not sharpness, not resistance, curiosity. What if I want to believe again, she said, but I don't know how. Clinton leaned back. Then you're closer than you think. One person in the audience clapped. Then another. Then silence again. Renee looked down at her hands. Then at Clinton. We'll be right back, she said softly. The red light went off. But the cameras? They were still rolling. The studio lights dimmed for the break, but the tension didn't lift. No one moved. The applause sign stayed off. Even the stagehands tiptoed. Back in the control room, a junior producer whispered, Are we still airing this? The executive producer didn't answer. His eyes were glued to the monitor. Renee Blake sat motionless, her hand resting gently against the outline of her earpiece. Her thoughts weren't on the show anymore. Not the ratings. Not the segment clock. Her mind had drifted somewhere she hadn't visited in years. Sunday school hymns. Whispered prayers before auditions. The old wooden pew where she first believed life had meaning. She didn't expect this. Not from Bill Clinton. Not tonight. The countdown ended. The light blinked red. They were live again. But no one smiled. No music. No fanfare. Just two people, facing each other in front of millions. Renee swallowed hard. Mr. President, she began, her voice low and unguarded. When I was 13, I asked God to heal my mother. I prayed every night for 6 months. Her throat caught. She looked away. She died anyway. The audience stilled. Clinton's expression changed, his gaze more tender now, but also filled with something weightier than sympathy. Understanding. I never told anyone that. Renee whispered. You just did. Clinton said softly. Renee's voice cracked. Do you know what it feels like to believe in something with everything you have, and be met with silence? Clinton nodded. Yes. A pause. Then, I prayed every night before the 2000 election results came in, he continued. Not for victory, but for peace, for wisdom. And when it didn't come, when the world spun out, and I felt forgotten, I wondered the same thing. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. But faith, he said, isn't a vending machine. It's a relationship, and sometimes silence is where it grows deepest. Renee's eyes welled. She shook her head slightly. I'm not the woman who once believed. I've built something else now. A brand, a platform, a voice. Clinton gave the smallest smile. And maybe now you're being invited to build something deeper. She let the silence stretch. The audience wasn't restless. They were holding their breath. Then Renee asked a question that no script had prepared her for. Do you really believe Jesus can still meet someone like me? After everything. Clinton stood. The movement was gentle, not dramatic. He reached into his coat, but didn't pull out a letter. He simply placed his hand on the arm of her chair, like a friend would. I don't just believe it, he said. I've lived it. She stared at him, then at her audience, then at the cameras, and then, slowly, she stood. Can I ask you something? She said. Anything, Clinton replied. Will you pray for me? Not now. Just later, when it's quiet. Clinton nodded. I already planned to. The screen faded to black, not with music, but with stillness. But for everyone watching at home, the moment didn't end. It had just begun. The final segment began without warning. No intro music, no wide camera sweep, just a tight shot of Renee Blake, standing next to her chair, eyes damp, expression unguarded. She took a breath, then looked toward her guest. Bill Clinton stood too. His hands were relaxed at his sides. Not triumphant, just present. I don't know how to end this, Renee said, turning to the audience. I've been on TV for 23 years. I've interviewed presidents, authors, athletes, people who survived the unthinkable. But tonight something changed. She turned back to Clinton. I invited you here to talk about belief. I thought I was ready for anything you might say. But I wasn't ready for grace. The studio was silent, reverent. I've built a career teaching people to look inward, Renee continued, to find truth inside themselves. But I've spent years afraid of silence, of facing what's missing. Clinton said nothing. He just watched her. Let her speak. And tonight, Renee said, voice trembling, you didn't argue with me. You didn't try to win. You just sat here and told the truth. She wiped her cheek with the back of her hand. And I think I needed that more than I knew. Someone in the audience began clapping. Another joined. Then another. But it wasn't applause like a show ending. It was release. Clinton took a small step forward. Renee, he said softly, when I was younger, I thought faith was something you kept to yourself. Private. Polite. But then I realized, when the world is on fire, people don't need whispers. They need anchors. He looked out at the crowd. We live in a time where truth sounds like noise and comfort sells better than conviction. But truth doesn't have to shout to change lives. It just has to be lived. The audience was still again, not out of confusion, out of clarity. Renee looked down, then up at the cameras. To everyone watching at home, she said, I don't know what you believe, but I know this. Tonight wasn't scripted. I didn't expect to be moved. I didn't expect to remember what it felt like to believe. She paused, took a breath. But I think I want to learn again. The screen faded, this time slowly, gently. And in the days that followed, that single moment was watched by millions. Not because it was explosive, but because it was honest. Bill Clinton returned home to headlines he didn't ask for. But he didn't chase interviews. He just kept showing up, quietly, in churches, schools, and town halls. And Renee Blake. She took a week off. Then she came back, different. Still sharp. Still confident. But quieter. More curious. And in the final seconds of her first episode back, she looked into the camera and said, Don't be afraid of the silence. It might be where the truth starts speaking. If you like the video, don't forget to subscribe and press the like button.